11:20 today. You'll hear from the Titans head coach. Now, they haven't made the Tyler Boyd signing official, so be curious to see whether they throw him up there in front of us without announcing the new wide receiver that they have reportedly signed. So no confirmation yet from the team. I'm sure they'll get questions about it. He'll probably get up there and say, if they don't make an announcement, hey, no, there's some stuff out there in the media, still working through the process on some things. So I can't answer any questions about that right now, unless, of course, they announce it, and then he'll talk at length.
In the Vrabel Times, the press release hits, the transaction comes out immediately after the press conference.
That is true.
Right? It happened quite a few times.
Well, no, that's not done on accident. It's, hey, Mike, well, it's like, the days that Mike would talk before practice. What the hell am I going to ask you before practice? Which is done by design because he wants it to be as short as humanly possible. Let's get on with the day. If somebody gets hurt, I don't have to answer a question about it. I'll see you guys tomorrow. So, how Brian Callahan or what Brian Callahan is asked about today, we'll see. We'll hear from Will Levis for the first time in a press conference setting. What, since locker room cleanout day?
Yep, since pre-Vrabel firing.
Now, you've heard from Will Levis because Jim Wyatt talked to him after the Super Bowl or at the Super Bowl about Vrabel getting fired. He was at the Masters, sat down with Laura Rutledge and was asked about, I think, not specific free agent signings, but just basically all the newness around him. And this will be a more specific conversation. And also he's had the opportunity to work out with these guys for a little while now because having a new head coach means that they could open up their offseason program earlier and get these guys into the building even faster. And he's been around. He's been around the facility basically the entire summer, save the few weekend trips in a golf tournament here or there. So be curious to see what he has to say. The question that we're asking, though, is what would you rather do with Traylon Burks?
I've been happy with
Somebody sent me, one of the listeners sent me a reel on Instagram that was a cat making a similar sound to Slay. So I'm not sure if I like the cat sound better or that sound better.
I've been happy with
every time we talk about Traylon Burks. Is that because it's a scary conversation?
It's whatever you want it to be.
I think it's funny.
Clearly. A little trigger happy back there with the buttons.
I've been happy with
Yeah, that's what I thought. Would you move him? Would you keep him? Is he even a viable trade asset? We talked about the Jerry Jeudy deal, 2024, 5th and a 6th. He got paid on the other side of that deal. They did not. Jerry Jeudy, a former first-round pick, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah.
If not a high second. So Jerry Jeudy not getting commensurate value for the draft asset that you spent, but you can turn a 5th into a 6th into something. And for the Broncos, who were pretty light on draft assets at the time, it made sense. And you don't have any salary cap to pay him. And not that you would want to overpay Jerry Jeudy anyway, especially when you're paying Russell Wilson almost $40 million to go away this year. Traylon Burks does not have as much value as Jerry Jeudy did. We can all agree, yes?
You're not getting a day 1 or a day 2 pick for Traylon Burks.
Are you even getting a 5th? Because that's I would say if you move him, it's not even a salary dump because he's on a rookie deal.
Yeah. First-round picks are always going to get another opportunity, right? Like Isaiah Wilson got traded. Andre Dillard got, not the second contract that you want as a left tackle, but got a pretty decent contract at a free agency after not playing for the Eagles. And if I'm not mistaken, the Eagles just refused to trade Dillard, right?
Oh, yeah.
There were teams interested in Andre Dillard.
Correct.
Before the trade deadline, after doing nothing in
for
Philadelphia.
as much fun as we make of him, his continued existence as a professional football player speaks to the desperation. Because there's moments when he can do the thing that left tackles are supposed to do. And that is enough to give him another contract in Green Bay.
So is it worth trading Traylon Burks and sacrificing a little bit of that depth for a 6th or 7th round pick?
So just some feedback from the YouTube comments, and you can interact with the show on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. You also have the phone number, 615-737-1045 if you want to interact. Would you trade him? Would you keep him? Timothy Bennett, why do folks want to trade our wide receiver depth? Depth will be needed. Bryce R. says, I would take a 6th for Burks at this point, can package that to move up and get you something before he walks. Now, he has 2 years left on his rookie contract, plus a fifth-year option that one would imagine he is on a trajectory to have declined. But to Lucas's point, he's a former first-round pick. Former first-round picks continue to get opportunities long after they deserve them. And Traylon Burks is only heading into year 3. So as down on the Traylon Burks experience as I am, that doesn't mean that you should just throw your hands up in the air and throw them to the side. In fact, Ran Carthon, speaking about the need for wide receivers on the Install Live show that is now available to you in your podcast feed, your favorite podcast feed, also on the 104.5 The Zone YouTube channel. Ran Carthon speaking about the need for more wide receivers and also Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you can never have enough wideouts, as you guys know. Just attrition, as much as those guys have to run, there are going to be some injuries somewhere along the way. And so we're always looking to continue to improve the depth there because, like you said, 11 personnel is what the NFL has played in. Over 60% of our game is played in some form of sub packages. And so, we want to be able to put weapons out there. And, even though we have, wideouts to run 11, we also have 2 backs that can be, problems out of the backfield. So really excited about that and how this whole thing.
And they can both detach too. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, not just in the backfield. So if we talk a little more about Ridley, like when you put on his tape, what do you see? Because you hear a lot of people say some guys are a really good route runner, and Calvin Ridley is. So to you, what does that mean?
He's an elite separator. I think he does a really good job of making all of his routes look the same, off the ball, and he attacks it, just all out full board to where whether he's running a slant, whether he's running a comeback, everything looks like a go ball, and it puts the DB on his heels. So a lot of the game now, guys will play off coverage, open bail, and they try to run and get out of there. And so for a guy with Calvin's speed to be able to close that cushion and get on their toes, which now forces them to open up their hips. So now it gives him a bunch of ways to go. And I think, at the top of the route, there's not many guys that are better.
So that's Ran Carthon. Again, that's courtesy of the Install podcast with Greg Cosell, the live event that we did last Friday. You can check it out in your podcast feed. Subscribe to 104.5 The Zone on YouTube, and you can watch it there later this afternoon. Specifically, Ran Carthon's part 1 is already available on YouTube. So you can never have enough wide receivers, because I went into that thinking that he was going to get questions, Ran was, from the audience about Tyler Boyd. And he didn't. And maybe it's because we didn't have enough time to take as many questions as, I thought we might. He was going to take the kids and the family to the Morgan Wallen concert afterwards, so I wanted to get him out of there on a timely fashion. And typically when you ask people like that questions about players that aren't on their roster, what's the answer that you get? Well, we're still working through some things right now. We got a lot of irons in the fire is basically the generality that's given until a player is signed, sealed, delivered under contract. You're usually not going to get a general manager or a coach to comment on ongoing pursuits of free agents and things like that.
And it hadn't even been reported at that point.
Well, no, it had. He was there the day before.
Right, but it hadn't been reported that the Titans were signing Tyler Boyd.
No.
We had no idea if Tyler Boyd was going to be a Titan.
But that he was taking a visit, which, I think most people would have at least thought, okay, maybe that's, and I don't even think it had been reported that he left without a contract just yet. But either way, we don't have to get bogged down. The general manager just answered the question for you. You could always use more wide receivers. I fully expect them to go into this, at least into the initial 53-man roster, with minimum 8 wide receivers on the active 53. I think that, just based on what we know of the head coach's background, what their offseason acquisitions have told us, both in free agency and the draft, what already exists on the roster. I don't know if those numbers are going to include guys like NWI or Kyle Phillips or Mason Kinsey. By the time it's all said and done, Kyrus Jackson, those kind of names still floating out there. But I would expect 8 minimum on the 53.
So guaranteed, of the guys that are in the building now, Hopkins, Ridley, Boyd, which is not official yet, but reported. Then we'll say Burks, Phillips, NWI, and Jaquan Jackson. That's 7. And some competition there at the bottom with Trayshawn Harrison and Mason Kinsey and a couple of Kyrus Jackson. But how much more could Traylon Burks, because if his value right now, any trade value you would get for Traylon Burks is essentially because he was a first-round pick, right?
Yes.
Right.
That's the same reason you got anything at all for Isaiah Wilson after that mess.
So his value can't take that much more of a hit. If we're saying you could probably get something for him, he's a first-round pick, they're always going to get more opportunities. So his trade value is not really going to go down that much more, barring something catastrophic.
Agreed.
So, which means that there is upside to his value if he does anything this season. So what's the point of offloading him now for maybe a 6th, 7th when you can keep him, have that depth this season? Obviously, there is talent there. See if he can stay healthy. And if he gives you anything, see what you can get for him in the offseason if you want to go that route. Like, give yourself a better problem to have, right? If he has a decent season and he surprises a little bit, then the issue becomes, okay, well, do we actually want to hang on to Traylon Burks, who showed some stuff this past season, or do we want to trade him because his value is far better now than it was in the summer of 2024?
I think the more viable path, and it's not one that we've posed to you because we've posed to you trade him or keep him, but we didn't say when you might trade him. If he looks viable at the trade deadline, that's something that I'd absolutely consider, because I saw some stuff out there, it's just like one of those football rumors accounts, like breaking football rumors, which is not anything. It's just stuff on the internet. But I saw aggregators and things like that on Titans Twitter saying, breaking rumors, the Titans could move DeAndre Hopkins at the trade deadline if their season is in the crapper or whatever. I have no idea whether that's viable or not, and that they would that those options would not be on the table, or at least being considered. You have to have multiple plans, and those things start to get worked through, not at the trade deadline. You have to start thinking about them well in advance. But I think it'd make more sense to try and move Burks if things, one way or the other, if he looks good and teams are calling, but he's not getting the play time, I'd rather move him than Hop, to be honest with you. In that situation. But are you going to move him to a place like Kansas City, for example, who give you no value on the dollar, hardly? You bring him in, you probably win a Super Bowl with Traylon Burks, and how sick would that make Titans fans?
But if Burks looks good and suddenly becomes a trade asset, then how much do you start thinking about, like we've talked about many times,
keep him here?
The 1, 2, and 3 receivers on this roster, like we've said a lot, will be 30 by season's end, or older in the case of DeAndre Hopkins. So is it the worst thing if Traylon Burks shows something to have some sort of pipeline in your building for that position moving forward?
Nope.
So that you don't have to go back to square one whenever Boyd, Ridley, or Hopkins' time is up, whether that is contract up or the drop-off comes.
Agreed. Traylon Burks, through 2 seasons as an NFL player, he has played in 22 games. He has caught 49 passes. He has 665 receiving yards total in those 2 seasons. And he has 1 receiving touchdown in 2 seasons. He does have another touchdown that was a Derrick Henry fumble that Traylon Burks did recover in the end zone after, I think Derrick got it like punched out, peanut punched or something like that.
Yeah, against the Bengals.
Yeah. I'm not willing to call him a bust yet, though. I'm not. And I know that most Titans fans are probably there with him. In the same way that I'm talking about, hey, if you don't 100% know about Will Levis by season's end, you probably look at moving him, if you can, depending on how this goes and if he's healthy. If you don't 100% know about Traylon Burks by season's end, this is as important a Traylon Burks year as it is a Will Levis year for all the reasons that we've just outlined. Viability here in the future. They're going to need wide receivers in the not too distant future. Boyd, reportedly, it's a 1-year deal. Hopkins is technically on a 1-year deal. It's an expiring contract. We'll see if they pursue extension talks or let him test the market and then potentially bring him back. Jimmy Wyatt has talked about the idea that he could foresee a future in which DeAndre Hopkins would be on this roster in 2025, but technically 2 of your 3 are on expiring contracts, and the other one, as you mentioned, is going to be 30 by season's end.
Who needs a bounce back in year 3 worse, Burks or NPF?
Worse?
Like both get a lot of time
for
rookie
them
year.
Personally?
Yeah, for them
personally, yeah. Traylon. For the success of the team, NPF.
NPF, yeah.
Because Traylon's impact has now been mitigated substantially. NPF's is still very much, front and center. So for them individually, Traylon is 100% the answer. For the success of the team in 2024, You need Nicholas Petit-Frere to turn into something that's just competent.
But why is Treylon definitely the answer then, just for the individuals? Because as we said, Treylon has that first-round pick background to fall back on.
Sure.
He's going to find another opportunity.
Because
is.
The other answer is Malik, and that becomes, it's just less, I don't know, it's less realistic. I don't want to be harsh about it, but that's kind of the harsh reality of Malik Willis' situation, even though I consider his situation to be very unfair. What's happened to Malik Willis has been very unfair. But football is not fair. Work atmospheres are often not fair. Life is often unfair. And how he meets the moment and overcomes, I don't want to say that it's entirely dependent on him, but it kind of is.
It's tough. It's so hard to imagine a worse spot for him to have fallen into, right?
Well, it's a bit of a nightmare because it should have been the best possible situation. It was painted out of those not first round quarterbacks, because he obviously wasn't. He was a third rounder. But out of those 2022 quarterbacks, he was in the best position, theoretically. And then it all goes to bleep, right? It all just goes up in smoke in front of him. And all of a sudden he's out there wide-eyed against, who was the first game that he played? It wasn't Houston. That was the first start.
He started against Kansas City.
He started against Kansas City.
That was
and
after Houston.
Yeah, because he won the Houston game. But I can't remember the game before that Tannehill got hurt, and I want to say
Colts. Yep.
So you toss him out there. He's wide-eyed, and, he's got Derrick Henry, and he doesn't have to throw a forward pass, or he doesn't have to complete a forward pass an entire second half of football against Houston because the run defense is so porous. But Malik Willis it's just gone wrong at near every turn. And I appreciate that that's not reflected in his body language or in his attitude or his demeanor. That's the right approach. Whether he's able to succeed or not, it's going to be one of the more interesting stories of training camp, even if he doesn't end up on the active roster by year's end.
So in the end, we're saying keep Burks. If you're not going to get more than a 6th or a 7th, keep Traylon Burks on your roster this season.
Even for a higher day 3 pick than a 6th or a 7th, I would probably keep him.
Yeah, I agree.
Because Titans fans are no stranger to injury, and if he is viable at all, and if he can be a benefit to this football team at all, he is probably worth more to you right now than a future 5th.